P.A.F. pickup repair coming up. Okay, what I have here in this FedEx box is a P.A.F. in need of repair. It was sent by a customer, and when we get inquiries about P.A.F. pickup repair, we ask that the person send us a photo of the pickup so we can authenticate that it is in fact a P.A.F. pickup. We did get those photos, and this is a pickup out of a Tal Farlow guitar that is in need of repair. And it is a genuine P.A.F. spec pickup. Don't recall if it's a P.A.F. or a patent sticker, patent number P.A.F. spec pickup, but we'll find out when we open up the box. And I'll go through all the steps necessary to get this thing working properly, and you can go on that journey with me. So let's get this opened up over at the workbench. Use my trusty case pocket knife here. And we'll see what kind of shape what we have is here. Oh. Well, it's well packed. Okay. I don't see a note, but hopefully there's one wrapped up in here. If you do ship something, obviously email us and we can authenticate it, but also when you send it, leave a note detailing what you need, because you'll get very personal attention, but you won't be your only customer. So, okay, so we have, looks like here we have a baggie with some parts. So I think obviously this needs to be made complete. Oh, okay. So this has, I'll see if you can focus on it here. This has vinyl tape around it, vinyl electrical tape, which I think almost certainly means this has been rewound, because I don't know any good reason to put that on there if that's not the case. But I'll peel it back. It does have plain enamel wire in there. I'll peel it back, see if we get any continuity off of these coils. Yeah, also this is sort of as a cautionary tale for any of you out there that might have something like this. Don't do anything to it. I don't know who put the vinyl electrical tape on it, but if it was to cover original coils, it just confuses the person repairing it as to what's really going on, and it's going to devalue your pickup. So at first, my first impression would be there would be no other reason to put that tape on there other than it's been messed with. So, okay, let's open up the second package here. Okay. All right, well, it looks like we've got some parts here to turn this into a complete pickup. Okay. We've got a vintage patent number base plate, and I would say that's a vintage P.A.F. cover. And that may be also, although to me it looks like it may be a little later. It's not quite as curved on the edges here, but that detail varies a bit as well, because these are all the process by which these were. Oh, here's a couple of springs too. Make sure there's nothing else. But the process by which these are buffed is a hand process. So it starts with a grinding step, and then it goes on to progressively heavier grits of belts, and then buffing. So because of that, you do get some variation in how each of these covers looks. But this is a bit more. This doesn't quite. This looks P.A.F. This looks something else. But we'll see what the customer wants to do as far as the covers. I don't know if he wants both those to go back on, or he wants us to supply one that maybe matches that better, but we'll find out. Base plate. That base plate does look authentic as a vintage patent number base plate, and obviously no brass screws. We'll find some screws that are accurate to vintage to put on there. They have the wood spacer, and it looks like is that a short knife? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see what we can do about kind of discovering what's going on with the coils here. The pole screws on this look original, just at first glance. Slugs look original also. So this is certainly worth repairing. But the question is does it require a rewind? And I guess I've got to see what is underneath this vinyl tape in order to really know. Okay, well, I'm going to turn on my handy dandy fume extractor here. I'm going to unsolder. This is obviously this is not original solder work, if you see that. And there's a very short start lead here. So I don't know if this was cobbled together from multiple parts, if someone rewound this, or what. But the magnet here does look authentic. I'll check to see if this is an alnico 2 or 5. Very often these early P.A.F. spec patent sticker pickups are actually short alnico 2. And this is a P.A.F. spec pickup, assuming these are the original leads, which probably isn't a safe assumption, but it does have 2 black leads. So we'll deal with the magnet later. Let me switch on my soldering iron. Okay, a little tip with trying to separate leads like this, or just to kind of reflow the solder to get hopefully a clean surface to resolder. If we're able to do that, you kind of do this over a piece of wood. You can gently drag the soldering iron over it and remove some of that excess solder. All right, we have them separate now. Let's see what kind of resistance reading we can get. See if we're even dealing with functional coils. Oh, keeper bar here. That looks original as well. These keeper bars too often have a part on the end here where it's pinched out of square, because they cut these on I think they probably cut these on a bench shear on one end when they made them. So you get this little burr distorted part on the end. Okay. All right, we do get a reading there. Okay. I'm not getting a very stable reading out of that. Let's try this. I'm getting something over 4K with that, but it's not very stable. Same with this one. Except this just keeps creeping up. This is at 5.4. I'm going to guess that this is not an original coil. This might be... Now, my thinking for this is that the square hole here is very clean. The wire in there is very clean. Here it's pretty dirty and dusty. But again, I've got to see what's under the tape. So let's see if I can very carefully... Hopefully, if I do this, hopefully there's some paper tape under it. This is just covering up. I don't think that's what we're going to see, though. No, I don't think so. So it's vinyl tape all the way. Okay. Oh. Hold on here. So this is probably why we don't have a stable reading. We got a stray wire here. A possibility is here too that this was a dead coil, that someone kind of fished another lead out to get a good reading out of it, but no, that's our start. Okay, well, let me see if I can get a more stable reading out of that. Or sorry, that's our finished lead, not our start. Okay. Oh, that's too heavy. I have to sand some of the plain enamel insulation away here to bare wire, and then I can see what kind of reading I can get. But that plain enamel coating is actually insulation for the copper within. So in order to get a reading, you've got to remove that insulation. Okay. All right, now that is a stable reading right there, right off the bat. So that's good. That means that if I put a finish lead on this, we'd get a functional coil. It's in the range that you might expect for something like this. It's 3.9. I've been handling it, so it may be a bit higher than it would be normally. All right, let's take a look here at the adjustable screw coil. This one reason too you don't want to kind of go solo on repairing this is, with the tape, this tape's leaving quite a bit of residue on the coil, and what I'm going to put in here won't be as prone to that. Okay, I thought it might be interesting to show you some of the details I look at to authenticate a vintage P.A.F. style pickup, actually a vintage P.A.F. pickup. And I'm going to point out some of the details. It's a little jerky. This is a bench microscope, digital bench microscope. So it's not really, I'm filming this, but the frame rate seems to be a bit low. So this is a screw bobbin. And since there's a bit of dirt in the square hole there, I think it's possible that this is an original coil. Now, of course, this could have been faked, but that's one thing it's got going for it. If you look at the plastic material on a vintage one, the surface is not highly polished. You can actually see the polish marks up this close to see the texture of the polishing of the mold. A mold maker will designate different levels of, there's a number designated for different levels of gloss that the mold is polished to. And I forget the number that this is, but this has a correct look. It doesn't have that shiny, ultra gloss, wet, sort of glossy look to it. Let's take a look at the coil. It does have plain enamel wire. The coil shape is in line with what could be for a P.A.F, but that's really not an indicator that it's an authentic coil. Some of the details that are different with this is since it was wrapped with electrical tape, the adhesive residue on it is clear. A vintage coil would have adhesive residue from a black adhesive. This is a piece of original, right here is a piece of original P.A.F 3M tape. And you can't really tell from this, but that adhesive, if it transfers to the coil, will be black and not clear. You can see a little bit of it. They use the same tape to tape the edge of the base plate, the end of it. And let's see if we can get it to focus on this here. There we go. So that's some of the black adhesive left behind. So this is an indicator that it was at one time taped with the original correct tape, which you can't purchase anymore. So that authenticates the part, but again, none of that residue is really present on the coil, which again leads me to believe it's been rewound. So that's the screw coil. Let's take a look at the slug coil, and I'll point out a few other details that I look for if I'm going to authenticate one of these. I think I mentioned this before, but a vintage P.A.F has got four. The original mold for the bobbins was a 4-chambered mold, meaning that they made 2 screw coils and 2 slug coils with each run of injection of plastic into the mold. So as a result, you have 2 variations of slug coils and 2 variations of screw coils. This is one of the variations of the slug coils, and I can tell because it has this. The radius here does not transition fully smoothly into the straight line of the edge here of the bobbin. You can see just a little jog right there. So I know from this that this is in fact an authentic vintage P.A.F bobbin. Some other things to point out with this is the texture of the plastic is a little ripply. That can come about by either having been wax potted with too much heat or just being exposed to too much heat at some point. But it can also happen during the molding process. The mold itself has to get up to temperature, and the temperature varies a bit throughout the run. And as that run progresses, the sheen and texture of the plastic will vary a bit. So as this was probably done near the beginning of the run for the bobbins before the mold was fully heated up. That's what happens when we get ours made. I've been to the plastic molder multiple times to approve parts, and that's just something that happens as part of the process of doing it. Some other details here are the slugs. Again, have what you would expect with a bullseye pattern, and so the bullseye pattern varies because these are cut off with a machine that's meant to make dowel pins, and it's actually more expensive to get the slugs made than it is for the screws, because it requires more machine time, and the material's a little higher tolerance in order to be a press fit into the bobbins. But they're each individually cut, so this bullseye pattern varies a little bit between them, and that's an indicator that these are correct. It can vary widely, but some cheaper reproductions will have a very consistent pattern that is made with a cold header die, which is the cheaper way to cut these, but it makes it extremely consistent pattern, and that would be another tip-off to a fake P.A.F. pickup, and not a vintage original. Although our vintage P.A.F. pickup reproductions, and again that's patent applied for, is what that acronym is. Ours are made in this fashion, so your better reproductions will in fact have them cut off correctly rather than made with a cold header die. Okay, I am going to take both of these coils, and I'm going to take 10 feet of wire off of them. The purpose of this is to get the ohms per foot of the wire on the possibility that these may be original coils. I don't think they are, but I don't want to. I want to proceed as if they are. And once I take that 10 feet of wire off, I can measure the ohms per foot, measure the wire diameter, and also this will begin to give me an idea as to whether or not these coils were wound on a vintage machine. There's cues that you can identify that have to do with which machine they were wound on of the original machines that Gibson used. That'll be a tip off to me as to whether or not these are original coils. So in order to do that, I also have to unwind a few layers. But let me do that, and I will let you know what I found out. Okay, I've got a little progress report here. For the slug coil, I was able to take a few layers off. I put 10 feet of wire on a ruler. Haven't measured it yet, but I don't think I'm going to have to. This is a vintage coil, and I cleaned it off a little bit with a Q-tip here and some lighter fluid, and sure enough, some of the adhesive was coming off as black. Some was clear, some was black, so it still had a little bit of evidence of the old tape on there. And it has a turn per layer that is associated with at least 102 wind, and the tension also. And I believe this to be an original coil that was wound by at least 102. So that's good news for that coil. I'm on to the screw coil. This screw coil has got the problem of not located the finish lead. It was broken when I took it apart. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to continue on cleaning it up with a Q-tip here, and maybe that lead finish, the magnet wire finish will reveal itself, and I can see if I can get a stable reading out of it. All right, here's another update. Again, this is the adjustable screw coil, And this is the one that I actually thought was most likely to be original because it was dirty in the square hole there. And the fact that the slug coil, which was the one I found most suspect, I believe to be authentic, leads me to believe that this one likely is also. But it's got a problem. And the problem is not unusual for a vintage P.A.F. is that they were not, the Gibson was originally not necessarily real attentive to how centered the winding guides were for these bobbins. And the upshot of that is this bobbin is built up on the top flange quite a bit. Over time, that can expose some of the wire on the long edge here of the flange, and you may have multiple breaks in it. And in a case like that, it becomes pretty hard to, you might get lucky and find all of them, find the last break, but very often it has to be rewound. But I have found a break. This lead here. It's bound up on this other wind, which would be an indicator that this is probably one of several breaks that happen along this edge. In fact, there may be another one right here. I'm looking at it. But I'm going to see if I can get it. I'm going to strip this with a little bit of wet sanding paper. I'm going to see if I can get a stable reading. And if I do, I am going to consider this repaired, and 2 authentic coils. Because again, the adhesive that I'm getting off there, some of it is still dirty. As you can see on the Q-tips here, some of it is still that black adhesive. So it's a mixture of both. For some goofy reason, someone taped these with clear electrical tape once upon a time, and retaped the finish leads. And maybe they thought they were helping it out, helping prolong the life. I'm not sure what the motivation would have been. There was, at some point, there was some people would unwind coils to try to make them perfect resistance reading for both with vintage P.A.Fs, which is sort of one of the characteristics of a vintage P.A.F. is that they very often have mismatched coils. In fact, it's more typical that they will be. But for them to be technically perfectly humbucking, they would need to have the exact same number of winds. So it's possible once upon a time someone wanted to fix, quote unquote, this problem of a P.A.F. pickup with these. Maybe that's why they did it. I don't know. But let's see if I can get a stable reading out of this. I'll be back. All right, I'm back. And I've got good news. I'm frankly shocked. And the customer, I think, should be very happy with this. See, I'm glad I did not have to rewind this. This lead gives a stable reading. So you can see it's a little shinier there. I stripped it with the coating very carefully with some wet dry sandpaper. And it's got a stable reading that is perfectly suitable for the accompanying slug coil, which is right there. So the state of this is that I'm going to put some finish leads on. This one is going to be quite tricky. That, in someone's infinite wisdom, has cut that short, and I'll have to splice a piece of wire on there. These are typically, the start wire for the screw coil is typically shorter anyway, because Gibson's method of soldering this to the base plate was to solder it right there at the end of the screw coil. And consequently, they'd make that lead very short. And I think sometimes people take these apart and then clip them shorter. Maybe I can get away with soldering it there. Maybe that's what I'll do. I don't think it would have been that short originally. Oh, right there. You can see. It should line up. I don't think originally it would have been that short. I may put a little bit of lead on there just as a little insurance for the life of this thing. But, so we've got 2 original bobbins. The base plate here is a P.A.F. spec patent number base plate. It didn't come with the screws, the base plate mounting screws, but fortunately, I have some that will look totally authentic, and I've got to put a braided lead back on here. And we've got that too. In fact, I'll show you. This is one other detail, and since we're here with the microscope, I'll show you what you look for in a vintage braided lead. There are 2 strands on the braid. That's correct for vintage. That's what we have made from Gavitt. We order it directly from Gavitt Wire. And also the core of this will be insulated with a black fabric layer and then a white fabric layer. And then you have the actual center conductor. That's the way it is on the vintage one. I think that center white fabric is some sort of synthetic fiber called Celanese. I think maybe it's sort of a industrial rayon of some sort. But we got to put the braided lead on there. Get some of the correct screws. I'll have to tape these bobbins up. Put finished leads on it. And also, let me find the covers here. We have the original cover here that the customer supplied, or a original cover. I assume it's for this. He actually gave another one here, but I do not believe this is I think this is a later cover right here. Maybe you can see the difference. It's very subtle, but this is a little crisper on the edge there with a vintage P.A.F. cover. Also, the level of tarnish really doesn't fit the other. This one's quite a bit shinier. So here's the original P.A.F. cover. I did find one of ours that's pretty close to this. See if I can, right there. Maybe that's the better way to check it. This level of kind of crisp edge depends on how it's ground when it's processed to be buffed. But this one got a little bit more on the edge. But anyway, I'll supply that other cover and put this one on the pickup. Let the customer know that I think he's got a authentic, functional, vintage P.A.F. On top of that, I'm going to test this magnet, which is a vintage magnet, and find out if it's just find out what grade of alnico it is. All right, I'll switch over to, I think we're done with the microscope. I will switch to the bench camera and get to work on putting this back together. Okay, let's get this thing back together. I think I got everything I need here. I have the coils. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this wood spacer. I'm going to put the braided wire on. Oop. Strip it. I have a little machine dedicated just for that. let's put the finished leads on these coils. Reuse, if possible, I'm going to reuse this finished lead. The other one was pretty messed up, so this one I think I might be able to reuse, though. Let's see if we can get that sorted out. Originally that would have had one piece of tape kind of folded over, but I'm going to put that there as a little bit of extra protection against the possibility that the solder joint from the pigtail lead, finished lead, could cut the coil. Let's strip just a little bit more of this. And you want to kind of loop it around there so that you have a little bit of, well, it's almost like a strain relief on the end of the pigtail wire. So if it does get tugged, it's not going to pull it straight out of the off of the magnet wire. All right, I'm going to clean off. Just there's more residue here on the bobbin. So I'm going to put tape on the outside of it. Not a good idea, but let's clean that off. Now let's do the adjustable screw coil, and this is the one that's a bit more fragile. And you have to run this, you'll see this on vintage P.A.Fs, but you have to, with a coil like this, you have to run the tape up the sides a little bit to cover the possibility that that tape on the edge of the top flange, or not tape, but wire, may over time protrude onto the top of the bobbin. Okay, so I have not extended this lead. I'm going to give it a shot to just, that is so short, I think I probably should try to solder it without. I'm afraid that the more I mess with it, if it has to be redone at a later date, there's just going to be nothing to work with. So let's see if I've got stable readings out of these, and then we'll work on getting these back together. Yep, that's good. And that is also good news all around. Okay. I'm just going to let these sit for a little bit. I'll be back. I'll let these sit. And because I'd like to find out what these read without me handling them. And then, just put that in the catalog of P.A.F repairs, and help me inform what we make. All right, I'm back. Let's get this together. I have the readings I needed, and now we just need to assemble it. Also tested the magnet. The magnet is a short magnet, and it's A4. A2 and A5 in this period is common. A4, kind of less common, honestly. I have seen them, A4. And if you want to know how I test them, it's a bit of a job of extrapolating based upon the inductance reading this magnet gives compared to other known magnets that I have here that I know are A2, A4, A5, and A3. Because the magnet itself, so I have a test pickup that I use all the time for this test. That's the only thing I use it for. And the magnet itself will change the inductance reading with an LCR meter. And this is an LCR meter, but it'll change the inductance reading. It's not totally foolproof, but it gives a pretty accurate picture of what you have. Sometimes A2 and A4 can look very similar as far as the inductance reading, but this measures quite close to known A4, and so I'm gonna go with A4. I'm gonna very carefully tack down that start lead. Just bend it downwards here. Oh, you know what? It's just a little bit of insulation in the way. Melted. Let's give it every chance possible. Flatten it out. Okay. I think that's it. Call that a success. You have to be very careful about the brass screws here. You want to do it by hand here. See if you can follow the old threads. Let's snug that up. Just enough to get the magnet in place. I think this should be the north side. And since it's a short magnet, you can center it right in the middle of the pickup. Long magnet, you'd have to offset it a little bit so that the magnet would end right on the edge of that side of the bobbin, so that you have enough room to put the connections tucked underneath the side of the pickup. All right, here's our now dried spacer. Let's get this on. Now, what I'm going to do here too is, Gibson wasn't real good about making sure these were the tightest tolerance of slugs. So some can be real loose, some can be real tight, but I don't want these sticking either down too far or up too far. So let's make sure those are where they need to be before I put the bobbin on. Make sure the wood spacer is centered. When we assemble these, we actually use when we assemble our own reproductions, we use a torque, hand-driven torque screwdriver that will click, so we don't over-tighten these. But this is so, because if you over-tighten, you can damage butyrate. I'd rather do this, though. I don't even want to use one that'll click to stop. I'm just going to do it totally by feel here. There's tricks if the plastic is stripped. There's tricks to making it work, but I don't want to have to use any of those tricks if I don't have to. Now the pole screw bobbin, I'll do the final tightening of in a second. But I need to get the pole screws back in there, the correct bit. Let me grab that. Since these are threaded into the base plate, you want to try to keep the same screws, same orientation as it was originally if you have the original base plate. So fortunately these came with the screws already in there, so I think we're good. But I like to start with the outer two screws just to sort of establish that everything's lined up right, and then we can do the rest. Okay. All right, let's finish up with the other connections here. Both coils' finish wires are soldered together and tucked inside the bobbin, between the two bobbins. I like to use a bigger piece of tape for this, doubled over, just to give it a little bit more paper to insulate the whole thing, and then if you leave it just a little bit fatter like this, it kind of holds its place in between the bobbins a little better. Okay, good. And this one, we just need to solder to the center conductor, hot wire. And then we insulate that connection with a little bit of tape. I want to make sure there's no really sharp edges on this, because if that solder joint pokes through the tape, and just touches the base plate, then it grounds out the whole pickup, and you think like, oh, this thing doesn't work. Now, it's an easy fix, but you don't want that to happen. So make sure to put a lot of tape on this, kind of double it over on itself. Some guys use shrink tubing. Actually, I think the tape works better to tuck it in here. And I think it's easier to get off too in the future. Take the tape off, so if you do it right, the tape's, I think, the best option. Keeps everything tidy. Okay, so we're going to follow where the old tape was on the outside here. Again, there would have been a protective piece of tape, half-inch tape, or sometimes 2/4-inch pieces were used on a vintage P.A.F. But we're going to use a piece of half-inch tape to just protect the wires that are tucked in there. Scissors. All right. The assembled pickup, and let's make sure we got a reading. I think it should be fine. It's right in the range too that the customer wanted in case it had to be rewound, so it's kind of the best case scenario, really. This is going to read somewhere in the 7.5 range, I think. Okay, let's get the cover on. Now for the cover, let's see. Yeah, this is the original cover to it. You can tell from where the solder joints line up. Yeah. All right, good. Let's put the cover on. Typically, I would reflow these solder joints so they don't poke out. But maybe I can... I'm going to try it here. See if we could take advantage of actually having the solder on there to get us started. Yeah, I think it's fine like that. And I've got a jig we 3D printed. One of my guys wrote Viva only on here and spelled it out as to how the orientation is. If we do a gold cover, you only want to use Viva paper towels on it. Anything else will scratch the gold. So it's nice and tight fit though. And we can get this clamped down so that we don't have any microphonics going on. And so it won't need to be potted. We use this for, obviously for ThroBak pickups, but it works perfectly for a repro, well, not a repro, a vintage repair. Okay, so I just want to follow these old solder connections. I don't want to misrepresent this as being repaired, but I don't want to keep it as original as possible. So if we can keep the solder where the old solder was, all the better. Okay. All right. Maybe I'll... Now there's a little trick you can do. And maybe it makes sense to do this. If you put a little ferric chloride on a Q-tip, maybe diluted just a little bit, put it on those solder joints, you can darken them up a little bit. I'll do that. It'll just look more appropriate to what it is. Let me level out the screws here, and then let's see if we can listen to it in a guitar. I've got a test guitar that I can just clip it into with test leads. All right, let's see. You can get a good picture of it. That is the completed pickup. Let's see, that's with the... Let me go put some ferric chloride on it now. Let's see what it... Before and after. Why not? Put just a little ferric chloride on the Q-tip. It's subtle difference, but it just dulls. Maybe you can see it. It dulls the shiny nature of the freshly flown solder joints just a bit. And you can kind of... you can buff it back with a dry paper towel, but you know, we're just touching the surface. We don't want ferric chloride seeping into this thing. Okay, so it's a very dilute, tiny bit on a Q-tip. Maybe I've given a tip to someone making fakes, but it's just a little extra touch that if it seems appropriate for the pickup, I think probably there's no harm. So, okay, we're done with that. And I think the customer is going to be very happy. I'm pleased. I thought this was probably going to be a rewind, but it turned out great. And let's see if I can get in a guitar, and we'll finish up this video. I've got another one that's come in since then, another P.A.F that needs to be repaired. This one also has the same little jog and the slug bobbin. Okay, let's go back and maybe we'll have this in a guitar. All right, I'm back. I put the pickup in my test guitar in the neck position here. So this is the pickup that P.A.F pickup I just repaired, and this came out of a Tal Farlow neck position. So let's try it in the neck position of my test guitar here. And I played it a little already. It sounds pretty good, but let's play it for the camera. All right, that's it. It sounds good. It sounds quite good. I think the customer will be happy. I'm glad it did not have to be rewound. Okay, that's one more video in the ThroBak pantheon of epic long videos. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it this far, I'm guessing you did. If you did, please click like, click subscribe. We always appreciate that. Click the bell to get notifications of future videos. And once again, thanks for letting ThroBak be part of your search for great guitar tone.